and engaging. So now on to our wonderful speakers so we can learn more specifically about certain careers in science. First, speaking is Chad Landress with the U.S. Forest Service. Take it away, Chad.
Thanks, Sydney. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
It's good to see some familiar names in the participant list too. So thanks to everybody else, a lot of colleagues that are helping out. And you know, one thing that really struck me when that slide you had, Sydney, that had all the different career paths in science, technology, engineering, and math, is I did a quick count while the slide was up, and there's about 20 of those that, as a fisheries biologist, I work with those other careers that are STEM careers on a regular basis, almost daily basis. So the overlap with these types of careers is really, really important. And it's also important to consider when you're looking at potential career paths, because, you know, a lot of folks think, oh, you're a fish biologist, you go outside and catch fish all day or something of that sort. And maybe at some points in your career, that is what it entails. And even on a good day, a lucky day now, I still get to do that. But, you know, there's a lot more complexity to it, and a lot more variability than just going out and handling fish or looking at fish and fish habitat. So a little bit about me, just if that may benefit potential folks that might be interested in this type of career. So I've always been interested in nature and being outside. So, you know, once I learned that, kind of had a similar experience to this, where all it took was somebody telling me that you could actually get paid to be a fish biologist or to be outside in conservation. And so I was, you know, started to pursue that career path. I, you know, did some volunteer work in high school to get out with other professionals. So anytime you have an opportunity to do that, it's never too early to start. And that's going to be one of the most important things you can do, is to get field experience, and especially in any type of conservation work, whether it's fish biology, wildlife biology, and other outdoor conservation work. I did my formal college education. I got a bachelor's degree in aquatic ecology, and then worked some seasonal positions that I'll talk a little bit more about in a second for a while, and then got a master's degree in fisheries and natural resource management. So I've got a focus on aquatic and fisheries, but also kind of some broad natural resource management that tends to lend itself well to working for the Forest Service. So currently I'm the fish biologist for the Monongahela National Forest, but I've also worked for state agencies, DNR, worked for Fish and Wildlife Service, and I know we have speakers from some of these other agencies, so I won't expand on that. But what I will say is that being a fish biologist for different agencies means different things. And it's really important as you go down a career path to kind of figure out where your niche is and where your interests are. Because as a Forest Service employee, my primary focus is looking at the habitat and the landscape and the watersheds first and foremost, and how those affect fish populations and how those affect fish habitat. The photo here in the intro slide is I've got the backpack on. That's a backpack electrofishing unit that we use to sample for fish, and this is actually a University of Kentucky class that we took out to give them a demonstration of fisheries techniques. All right, next slide. So while I do get to go and actually sample fish some of the time, most of my work is actually centered around the habitat and the environment that affects the fishery. And I'll show you a few examples of the types of projects that we work on, and that me as a fisheries biologist, I try to lead these types of projects on the National Forest. And what's really interesting about being a fish biologist for the National Forest is I get to coordinate with other disciplines. I get to work with engineers, I get to work with wildlife biologists and other specialists, botanists, ecologists, and we get to integrate these ideas into projects on the ground. And it really is a, you know, when you look at these projects that we're looking at here, it's not one person that's designing and bringing it from point A to point B or before and after. It takes a whole team. So just as learning the science is important, also being able to work with people, you know, and bring people together as a team to accomplish a common goal is just as important to being a successful fish biologist or conservationist. So I want to go through a few examples of the types of projects that we have been working on recently on the Monongahela National Forest, and these types of projects are applicable to a lot of different places across the country, and there's a lot of different jobs that are associated with this. Maybe you don't like fish, but you like engineering, so you can help fish out by helping us design these stream crossings. So this example, the before photos on the left, the after photos on the right, and we basically had a road crossing a stream with an undersized pipe in place, and you can see that it's got what we call a perch, so there's a jump for fish to be able to swim through that pipe. And fish, just like us, like to move around and go places, and you know, take better opportunities for feeding and reproduction. And you know, pretty much the pipe on the left is essentially the COVID situation. You can't go anywhere and do anything, so they're kind of stuck there, and they can't make it upstream to migrate and reproduce. So what we did was design a better structure on the right that allows for the stream to behave naturally. We call it stream simulation. It requires going out with a lot of technical skills and taking three-dimensional topographic surveys of the stream up and down, of the road up and down, and coming up with a design using computer software programs, AutoCAD, computer-aided drafting, and then actually implementing the project, which is the fun part, but there's a lot of work that goes into the pre-work to get us to that point. This is just one example of how it takes multiple types of science to get one thing in place for what seems like a fish focus. All right, next. All right, this is our stream habitat enhancement, our large woody material, and this is probably one of the actions that we do, one of the restoration actions that we do that garners the most interest from the public, because one, we get to use these crazy machines. The machine on the top photo is called a spider excavator because it can actually walk, so we can actually avoid sensitive areas when we're working up and down a stream. We also use backhoes and excavators and other heavy equipment. So again, as a fish biologist, the first thing you may not think about is heavy equipment, but to get some of this habitat restoration work that we do in place sometimes requires these tools, and it's really, really fun work. Again, a lot of planning, a lot of coordination with other people to get to this point. We do what's called hydraulic analysis to determine what types of structures we're going to put in the stream, and there's, again, a lot of design work that goes into these. So in a nutshell, what we're trying to do here in this instance is to reintroduce large pieces of wood back into these streams where it naturally would have been found, which provides cover and habitat for fish, and helps protect stream banks and reduces erosion and sedimentation. So all these things are good for the fish population. All right, next. Okay, next is riparian restoration. So this can be as simple as planting trees, and we work with partners like Trout Unlimited and other partners out there to implement this work. It's pretty low tech, but this is, you know, it offers us opportunities to bring people in, seasonal positions. These are summer jobs, typically folks that are just out of high school or in between semesters in college. They can work their summer semester with us, and we go out and we plant sometimes thousands of trees along stream banks to help improve stream shade, to keep the trout streams colder, stabilize the banks. So pretty self-explanatory there. Next. And then kind of a final one for a restoration activity, the last thing you may think about with being a fish biologist and you know, thinking about how to protect fisheries resources or roads and being up on the mountaintops. And in this instance, what we have here is this restoration is called road decommissioning. And the top left photo shows where there's a big erosion point on the bank. And the top right photo is us actually doing the process of decommissioning, which is decompacting and recontouring the road surface to allow water to infiltrate. And then the bottom photo shows the same road after a year or two. So it's, you know, regrowing vegetation. There's no longer that sediment and erosion making its way down the road into the streams affecting those fish populations. So, you know, this would be a recommendation as a fish biologist that we would give, but it requires working with our road engineers and other resources to actually come to a conclusion as to what the project's going to look like on the ground. Next. All right, so I gave you 4 examples of what restoration as a National Forest fish biologist may look like. And this is kind of our so what. This is what we're trying to protect. We got an example of an endangered fish on the top. This is the candy darter. And then we have our native brook trout on the bottom photo. And ultimately, both these species require clean water, low sediment loads. So we're really trying to protect the landscape to protect these fish, other aquatic organisms like crayfish and mussels, etc. So we also do monitoring, as well as our partners with the DNR, Fish and Wildlife Service, Trout Unlimited, others that do monitoring of these populations, directly going out and collecting data, habitat data, fish population data to determine the health of these fish and their populations. And that's how we determine if we're successful in our management type. So I'll cut it off there, Sydney, for at a good stopping point.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much. Are there any questions anyone has for the Q&A before we move on to our next speaker? Yeah, I don't think there are any questions coming up in the chat either. So you did a good job covering it, and thank you so much.